We have our guest here, Keith. He is the developer for the Westend subdivision out in Sulphur, Carlos area. We did a few videos, what has been like a week or so ago. And we wanted to bring Keith on because one, we want to hear from the developer. We want to get to know you. And then we want to talk about what makes Westend subdivision so special. So before we get into that though, Keith, tell us about yourself. Tell us about how you got started in the business.
In the business, well, I guess that was a few moons ago. To be honest, I started out in my 20s, and my motivation in my 20s was to actually build a place or have a place of my own. And starting out in the construction business in your 20s can be quite tough. I worked for my parents and so on and so forth, and so I had to figure out a way that I could build a house. And I've always had a passion for architectural construction and development. It's just something that I've always really enjoyed. So with all that being said, it started out as a necessity. So I went through and learned as much as I possibly could from the local developers and also national developers also, and started out with a small house right here downtown by St. Pat's was my first one. Learned a lot there, and quickly realized making $10 an hour building spec homes on my day job, I was going to have to do something different. So it just kind of evolved from there with a strong desire and a strong passion to succeed. So it started from there. I moved from single family dwellings into multifamily. And once I moved into multifamily, we kind of moved into the townhouse market and then commercial buildings and so on and so forth. So over the years, I've just kind of evolved, I guess, Val.
Well, and without giving away your age, because you said you got started when you was 20, talking about drive and talking about passion, right? So how long have you guys been doing this? I know right now we're talking about the Westend of subdivision in Sulphur, and I know we also have a few other projects. Of course, you've started because this is a big gap. And again, not to give away your age, but how long have you guys been in the business?
So, in the business, I've always been involved in the development business since my 20s. So I've got about 25 years into it at this point.
25 years experience. So, and Keith, tell us a little bit. I did a short video a few Saturdays ago, maybe it was on a Sunday. And we talked a little bit about Westend, but I wanted to bring you in because it's something for me as an agent to talk, but what does a developer has to say? Tell us a little bit about Westend. When did you guys get started? What makes this subdivision so special? Can you speak to that?
Yeah. Oh, of course. So, as a developer, we always are in search of the markets that are underserved, the markets that we feel that there is a demand, a pretty significant demand. However, there's just relatively limited supply. And you've got other areas in Southwest Louisiana that are thriving and doing well. We just felt that this area is a great part of the future because Sulphur people are really committed to their Sulphur roots, and there's just not a whole bunch of options once you start looking around Sulphur for places like this. So that was one of the driving forces. Another was at this point, of course, we had this industrial boom that's what's going on, and it's continuing in some way or fashion. And this property that came up with all of the drainage issues that have taken place all over Calcasieu Parish, this piece of property here is one of the highest pieces of property in the area. It's kind of the crown, if you will, of that entire area. It ranges in elevations from the lowest point at 17 all the way to elevation 23. So you're talking about a very high piece of property. Originally a pine plantation planted 30 years ago. Uh, we had the luxury of selectively harvesting the pine off of the plantation and retaining the hardwood trees, which are, as you and I both know, takes many, many years to establish. I
Yes.
Dad planted whenever I was on a tricycle that we're just getting shade from. So, I mean, it's a big, big deal to have established hardwood trees on your property.
Yeah, and that's a big selling point too, because most people, when they start looking at lots, it's clear there are no trees. It isn't as developed, and like you said, with the hardwood and everything out there, I think those trees have been there for what, 40 plus years. I mean, mature trees.
Some of them have, you know, the harvest was over 30 years old. So you would have to imagine that the trees that are remaining are between 20 and 40 years old, that are remaining on the property. So,
Yeah,
and a lot much easier for us just to clear cut a piece of property. It's so much more difficult to create parameters around each tree to salvage these trees. But it was so important to me at this point in my life because I can appreciate the trees and how long it takes to establish those. So uh,
and
that's
Keith too, I know we were talking about it being the crown of that area, and tell him why that is so important. I mean, I think this entire subdivision is in the X floodplain, correct?
It is. It's in flood zone X. The entire subdivision's in flood zone X. And why it's so important is because if you look at the center of the subdivision, it encompasses all four phases, encompasses 160 acres. But if you'll go to the center point of the subdivision, the water naturally drains in all four directions from the center away from that property. So, being it's a large turtle, it's a natural turtle's back and a ridge that runs all the way across. So, I was so pleased we were able to go out and take footage while a rain storm was occurring in that area because drainage is such a sensitive topic today in areas. And this property here is its features, its natural contours. It just does not have those drainage issues that others are experiencing in areas that are around this
Right.
part.
And also too, what that means if you have we have buyers that are viewing, that means you're in the X floodplain. You don't require to have flood insurance, which means you get to spend more money on the house, right? Now, Keith, tell us about the lot options we have. I know we have what, 1, 3, 5 options, five
So,
acre options.
and the 5 acre options we will have more in phase 4, and but we do have 1 acre is primarily the options, and we have 3 acre lot options also. Um, what about it is here we are in a setting, a country setting that we have modern amenities, meaning we have, when you start looking at it, we'll have high speed internet, we'll have LED street lanterns throughout the subdivision, we'll have underground utilities that go throughout, city water, um, and you've got a place where your growing families have an abundance of land to grow. And in the same subdivision, your empty nesters have that privacy where they can downsize and be near their grandkids, if they want to live in the same subdivision, which that's important to a lot of people at this time. So it's a very unique opportunity. I find myself out there working quite a bit. However, uh, I have had the opportunity to unwind and relax with the abundant wildlife, the bird species, and the deer walking by, through the oak trees. It's just so gorgeous. So those are the things there that the landscape commands outside activities and exercise. You're not on a busy street. You're walking through a subdivision that has this lush landscape. It just makes you really want to be outside.
Yeah, and you and I talked about that. I mean, this is country living at its best. This is where you want to be, right? Now, they also we kind of spoke to square footage wise is a minimum of 1,500 square feet that you have to build out there. That's one of the restrictions. And then we all know that in Louisiana, our buyers, especially the fellas, they like to tinker. So we kind of spoke to the shop options that are going to be built out there as well.
I'm so glad you, because what I didn't mention about my start was, as I developed throughout my career, I developed for the stage of life that I was in. And, West End mimics what I currently have as my home at this point. I have my dream home and my shop on one piece of property, and I just would not have it any other way. And so the 1,500 square foot minimum for the living area at the main dwelling was something that I pursued heavily when I started in the business. I was desperately seeking a subdivision that would allow me to build a 1,500 square foot, home. And most of these, whenever I was started, they were 1,800 to 2,000, and they were outside of my price range. So that's why I wanted to make sure of a few things. And one was a restricted subdivision. Second, 1,500 square foot minimum living area at the main dwelling. Third, one thing we didn't mention about Flood X and no flood insurance required is you're talking about very little earthwork for your pads because the land is up so high. So you're not talking about a large expense for the earthwork because of the property so high. But the 1,500 square foot is a big deal. The city water not having to deal with the water well is a big deal. And having the city amenities are a big deal. And that shop, having your home and your shop in one area to where you don't have, a lot of the times we get home and we'd love to go grab our boat and go out to the lake, but we're having to go to storage to go grab our boat. And then we bring the boat back to storage, or the four-wheelers or this or that. It's kind of the Saturday or the Sunday's over. So this is a place where you can store those things and have them right there and really enhance the quality of life.
Absolutely. Now, Keith, also speak to, I think for the subdivision itself, it will have an exclusive playground and park for the residents as well.
We have a proposed playground, and we have equipment, and we plan to have fabric structures over the top, because as I have 4 young children, I can appreciate that, a lot of the park and the park equipment that we have in our area without covered structures are not being able to be utilized because the sun beats down on this equipment. Too hot for the kids to handle. So yeah, we're special park on lot 62 in the subdivision that has been dedicated for a park exclusive for the residents of West End subdivision.
Perfect. And then I want to speak to also kind of the financing options that are out there for West End. Right now, the banks are offering 100% financing, 0% interest for qualified buyers. Keith, how low does that bring the payments to a month?
We've calculated them all the way down to $260 a month. I mean, it's almost as reasonable as some storage units. I mean, what this is with approved credit, of course, and this is a 2-year term. But the thought is, if you bought one today, in between now and the next 2 years, you'd be ready to start building. And that can be as easy as a conversion of your existing mortgage and plans, having your plans finished and going into the ground. So I don't know where you could get better terms than that.
Yeah, and again,
banks come on board to want to offer that same deal.
Yeah, I mean, you can't beat that 259. I mean, most people, like we said, in Southwest Louisiana, in our spare time when we're not working, we're fishing or we're hunting. And most of us, if we have a boat or we want a boat and we want to shop, so this area again is ideal.
Right, right. And look, you want a subdivision where it's restricted, where you know your property values are going to be stabilized, and you have like-minded other community members around you. That's why the restrictions were so important. We didn't want overreaching restrictions. We just wanted to make sure that we had a uniform understanding in the subdivision.
I think that's the key. You don't want to overreach, but as far as value goes with property, we all want some sort of restriction, right? We don't want the value to go down in something that we've invested in for long term. So we're going to wrap up this segment. Keith, is there anything else that you want to add to the video for our audience?
So our official acceptance for the subdivision is going to be on May 7th. It was supposed to be, I think, April 2nd by the parish. So it's getting close that we'll be ready to start closing on some of these lots. We received a few calls from builders that wanted multiple lots, and they wanted them in a row of 5 to 10. So there is a sense of urgency if you are considering purchasing a lot in West End subdivision. I would do so now, because once the builders come in and they buy the blocks of lots, then that the ability to live next door to a family member or friend won't be available anymore.
You got it. So, guys, you heard it from the developer himself. Keith, we appreciate you coming on and speaking a little bit about West End. So, guys, bring your plans, bring your contractors. This is where you want to be. If you're not familiar with West End, if you take I-10 or Bageless Parkway on 27, you turn left, and West Houston River Road property is just past Gill on the left. So, again, 0% financing. As Keith mentions, the notes are as little as $269 a month. You can't beat it. So if you guys have more questions, you can visit the Facebook page for West End Subdivision, or feel free to give us a call if you want to go by and actually look at the property. Keith, anything else?
Absolutely. Hey, I'll be sending over a PowerPoint presentation, and I hope you'll share that. And
yes, and that will be plugged into the video also.
Great.
Okay, perfect. Well, Keith, again, thank you so much. Thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions, let us know. Or again, visit the West End Subdivision Facebook page.
Very good.